Good day, creative spirit, and welcome. We'll start today's session with two hymns from Voices United. Our first hymn is number 17, O Ancient Love, verse 1 and 3. Number 40, Before the Marvel of This Night. Most of the lyrics, right? It's a good thing to have the text across the bottom, isn't it? All right. Let's move along here, Carolyn. Oh, right. God of love, we are so glad that you know us so well. We are glad you will not be surprised when we say that we have not loved you with our whole hearts, and that we have not loved our neighbors as ourselves. Oh, some neighbors we have loved, but not all of them. Be patient with us as we start over again and again. to set an intention of showing love and respect to every person with no exceptions, just as you have loved us. Well, it is Advent 4 coming up this Sunday, if you can believe it. I personally cannot. I'm in total denial that Christmas is as close as it is. Oh, but it is a good, Advent has been such a good journey so far. And I'm hoping that up until this point at least, and continuing today, that it has been a wonderful journey for you as well. Difficult, possibly, yes. There's no question that times have been particularly difficult this year, and things are weighing very differently on us. But hopefully that so far Advent you have really felt it in your soul. And as the theme of Advent 4 is love, taking from John 1 verses 1 to 18 and Psalm 130 verses 5 to 8, the poet George Herbert wrote, "Love bade me welcome, but my soul drew back." It's hard to take in the enormity of God's love made flesh in Jesus Christ. We look at the candles and hear the special music of the season. It's easier to listen to the radio or buy the red cup of coffee and then to dwell on the truth. The psalmist knew it long before Jesus. For the Lord there is steadfast love, and with him is great power to redeem. God became one of us out of love for all of us, then and now and forever. When we light the candle of love, we stop in awe of God's unending love. And with that lighting, whatever we face in life, God's steadfast love surrounds us. Now let us sing out of More Voices, and you'll find the lyrics on your screen. 220 out of More Voices. Hope shines as the solitary star. And let's do all four Advent verses of it, shall we? And I have for you a responsive prayer, and you will find the response at the bottom of your screen. Let us pray. Creator God, Create in us new intentions to show love to all of your creation. Create in us a desire to live simply and to appreciate every bite of food and every drop of water and breath of air. And together we say, help us to live this day intentionally with you. Christ, show us how to show love to all people. Help us to feed those who have no food and welcome those who have no homes. Help us to remember that you were homeless and a refugee, and to see you in all our neighbors. Help us to live this day intentionally with you. Spirit, give us the energy and determination to show love to those who appear to be unlovable. Show us how to overpower hatred with your love. Help us to live this day intentionally with you. Amen. For this week's love session, well, here are our pieces for inspiration for our love, and you'll see that some of them definitely have the continuation of the heart shape in them, and again, my own interpretation to keep my mind focused, right, about that maintaining our hearts and preparing our hearts and minds for the coming of Jesus. And so we've had that heart theme throughout all of our pieces each week. I'm not going to give a lot of instruction this week, as it's just going to give you time. I would like you to spend on the things that you have already experienced or learned or found work well for you within your own watercolor, that you just explore those further. All right, so I'll give you a couple little tidbits about what I've done sort of with each one, and then you will be on your own to create with as much love and compassion as you can in your watercolor, and I think it'll be great. So let's go ahead and see the usual cast of characters that we need for this week. Of course, our jars of water, our standard single sheet. For a second there, I didn't even think that they were the same size. Our single sheet of watercolor paper cut in two, so that's a 9x12 sheet cut into two. Your watercolor paints, right, and again, in whatever form that you may have. Some brushes. I found that because I was using sort of a different, sort of a variety of techniques and things that I hadn't necessarily done before, instead of just using just the round brush like we have in the past, I was also using the wider flat for water washes, which we certainly have used. A smaller flat was also helpful, and then a smaller round as well was really helpful. So you may need more than just the one or two brushes this week. Pencil and possibly an eraser, tape, and though I said last week, I realized that I said last week you needed tape, and then it turned out you didn't. But this week you actually will use the tape. So yes, tape again. White acrylic, if you happen to have it. The white acrylic paint will certainly help. Glue, the white glue, the school glue, or the glue stick, or both actually. Glitter, yes, you can use the glitter again this week. Woo woo! There's some love, feeling the love now. Let's see, markers. I've got some glitter markers if you happen to have those. Again, if you happen to have the metallic markers, gold or silver or both. Our Sharpies, our ultra fine and our fine Sharpies you may find come helpful. A toothpick. Now this actually, I couldn't find my toothpicks, so this is just the end of a skewer, right? The bamboo skewers. So that, and the only reason that I used it actually twofold. I used it as a dotting piece for some of the extra stars on here because the splatter wasn't working. It was the splatter was a little out of control that I wanted. So I was using it for dotting in that, but I was also using it for glue. So handy little skewer. And of course your Saran, your bubble wrap again, your paper towel or rags, definitely, always a must. And some of the gauze, if you've got some of the gauze again on hand, gauze bandages, or even a little bit from a, you can take apart a Band-Aid and some of the little gauze in there, wherever. This is just a bonus if you happen to have gauze or cheesecloth. Check your kitchen, right? And oh, my goodness, and I couldn't, of course, forget the salt, right? And scissors. I think I've covered it now. And the paint palette. No, now I think I've covered it all. All right, let's get started, shall we? So let's start with one piece of the 9x6. So that's the half sheet of 9x12 watercolor paper. And we will start with, because I think it's really very cute, we're going to go ahead and we're going to start with this piece first. And this is the little, I just think this little love piece is very cute. And we didn't have a lot of pieces, a lot of art over the last weeks that have gone landscape version. I know that we've talked about it, but we haven't had a lot that have gone that way. And this uses the gauze in as the swaddling clothes, I think is fun. And of course, we still got some glitter up here. I mean, we got the whole shebang here. One thing that I realized after doing it that I haven't included in this one is a heart. So one of those little tiny stars, you could always, if you've been including the heart as part of your reminder for your intentional Advent and to keep your awareness and your attentiveness throughout the weeks of Advent, perhaps one of those little stars you could turn into a heart. All right, I won't go into a lot, but here's the simple, you've got the instructions in the email. The basics of it would be to take your 9x6. You're going to want a bowl. I started out, I used a bowl to trace this out with. The tape is not quite large enough, as you can see. So a little fruit-sized, the fruit nappies, that worked out really well. Just to sort of lightly trace with your pencil that outline. It didn't have to be the whole circle. I mean, it can if you're more comfortable having the whole circle. You can always erase the other ends. And then I went ahead, so once I had that line, then I went ahead and just drew in an oval, all right, of the approximation of that space within the manger. Not necessarily the whole outside manger, but just that inside baby portion of the manger. So those two things you want to do lightly in pencil. And then you can go ahead and start with your watercolor. And this is wet on wet, right? So I would have traced my circle, my half circle, and started out with the wet on wet. So you're going to want to go ahead and about that halfway mark, right? Go ahead and water it down. Use your round brush, draw your water line first, and then fill in. And just like all the other pieces where you've added those skies or those dark multicolored backgrounds, same idea again here. One thing that you might find helpful is if you paint this top portion upside down. And this way gravity can work for you, right? So that you can have those, if you tilt it up, you can have those darker colors or those colors move back into the top of the sky. These little lighter sections, I found that because I wanted a little more light moving into it, and I sort of covered it all in darker. And then if I took my brush and dipped it in the clean water, took a little excess off, and then just went ahead sort of backwards and forwards a bit, rinsed it out, cleaned it off again, backwards and forwards. You could take a little bit of that color out once you were layering some of the colors and lighten those little sections up, right? And then it was just a case again of doing some splatter with the white acrylic. The manger, this I did use an actual hair dryer for the manger portion. Because I wanted some little strands. I first did a very light sort of brownish color around that circle or that oval that we had drawn, just to sort of give it a base. Let it dry. And again, if time's an issue or if patience is an issue, use your hair dryer. Though the only thing, and as much as I say that, the one thing that I don't like about using a hair dryer, it really ruins the calm that you have. The idea behind, of course, this is being in a contemplative state, right? So if you've got the music playing and it's quiet, short of the music, and your focus, once you turn that hair dryer on, it's like oftentimes flipping the switch in your head. So if you can manage the patience or manage the time to allow this to dry, so perhaps doing these two simultaneously, doing one layer here and then one layer here and back and forth, might be the suggestion. But the reason that I didn't want this fully wet each layer was so that I could add the different colors, the more greens, a little more brownish. I mixed some brown and some green together to give that straw manger kind of sense. And I wanted the little strands, if you will, to be able to be seen and not just this wash of color moving from one to another. This little portion around the glow, the halo, if you will, I lined that out with the Sharpie pen first, and then I created the face in here with the Sharpie marker, the ultra fine, the ultra fine marker, just to give myself some idea of where then I just went ahead and painted this on the dry. I didn't wet the paper here with the halo first, just dry. And then here I just used my glue stick and got the open plain paper section and took the gauze, and the gauze for you might be, I've already folded this, but it may have been like the wider square of gauze, right? It's as bad as the saran wrap. All right, it may have come like this. I've gone ahead and I folded it over just to give it a little more substance, tucked in some ends, and literally, because this was covered in glue stick, and you could easily do it too with the white glue. I just found the glue stick, my fingers weren't quite as sticky when you're trying to tack it down. But hey, here's an idea that bamboo skewer might help with that if you're using the white glue and you don't want your fingers all in it. And it was just a case of literally putting it down, folding it under, creating that shape, right? Give it some body. And then I did cut it. Once I got up around the head here, I cut it. And then I took another little strand and just twisted like this, and then laid it around and glued it down. And that just gives it that an extra little something. And then when it was all dry, I added, of course, the white glue and the clear glitter at the top, and the metallic love. And then that's as easy as that is. And it's fun. And gosh darn it, it is cute. All right, the next piece, definitely following the heart theme, is this. And this is just a little silhouette of what could possibly be, I called it, O Little Town of Bethlehem, but it doesn't necessarily. This is just a silhouette of how, towns like Bethlehem at the time would have been perceived as far as the silhouette goes. So the rounded roof lines, some little, the stone steps up, and in some cases the square tops. So just go ahead and you could look up a skyline on the internet if you'd like, but don't worry too much about it. I just went ahead and drew a heart. So the first thing that I did with this is, you'll notice that it is square. So I took the 9x6 and then just cut the 3 inches off to make a 6x6 card, okay? And the first thing that I did was take that ultra fine Sharpie and drew in the heart. And then I went ahead and drew the outline of the top of the silhouette, what would be the silhouette of the town. And then I just started filling in the heart with whatever colors, whatever sky colors, if you wanted it all white, if you wanted it to be, you know, more sun or more moon, or more red perhaps, or maybe all blue because we're still in Advent, however you might perceive it. And then you can change the colors, let them do this was all wet on wet. Okay, let them do their thing, let them bleed in, take some color out of some places, add some darker colors in. You'll notice, of course, that I started with a tape border. This has got the border on it, so you're going to need your green tape to tape that down first. Once it's, and then the city of Bethlehem itself, I didn't do all in black, but I did. Now, just notice too that there are some, when I did the watercolor, so this would have been one of those things that, you know, I take that back. I'm gonna, yes, I'm gonna take that back. I did the heart first, tape it, I did the heart, and then I went ahead and I did the wet on wet. And actually, I just randomly added some lighter sections in and around. It was still sort of a purplish with some little pinker sections on the bottom here. And those little pink sections is where I decided then that they would be my windows. Okay, and then I added the skyline. That might be a little backwards, but again, if you want to, it might be easier just to add that top of the skyline and go ahead and do the wet on wet. Again, if you're using the Sharpie, we know that they are water fast, all right? It's not gonna bleed once the water goes across it. So you can do that roof line first if you would like, it's fine. And then it's a case of just adding, again, you have to let it dry to add the layers on top of it to get those different colors. And I certainly let a lot of things happen in here as far as drying goes, and then dropping water in and removing sections and then adding more color and removing, and then you'll see that I also took some white. Now this I actually did in white watercolor. So if you add a little bit of paint or a little bit of water, tiny bit of water to your white watercolor, you may have to do it a couple times, but it will show up. And then of course I added a little jewel. These lines are strictly just for interest's sake. They were just, I was going around sort of the shift of color. Each place that the color shifted or changed, I just sketched in another little line. It's just interest's sake. Took the silver Sharpie marker and went around the roof line just because I was curious to see what it looked like. And you know, at the end of the day, I was pretty happy with this. Yeah, so that's another heart piece you could go ahead with if that's something that strikes your fancy for love instead. Or here is my other love piece. And this very much plays to the topic of the values that we were talking about last week. And that is, first of all, I went ahead and very lightly sketched a heart shape, again, random freehand heart shape, filled it in with the yellow, and then around it went with the first value of blue, whatever blue I decided to choose. And I think in this case it might have been a cerulean, or it might have been, I don't think it was the cobalt. It might have been values, no, actually it might have been either cerulean or the cobalt blue, values of the cobalt. I may have added some cerulean into it. And we said the values last week were, think of T as being the first value. So that would be the first one that goes down, right? The consistency of T. The second value would be the consistency of 1% milk. So that would be then the next layer out that you could add on top of it. And then the third value would be so that the paint is the consistency of table cream. All right. And that was how you can layer the colors. And then mind you, you can also change the colors, right? I think this is where I went to the the solid Prussian blue. And in here as well, there are sections where I went ahead and I dropped the water in after it had started to dry a bit, and that gives those little lines and things as well. I didn't worry about how I was necessarily layering, other than I wanted to get darker, and so I added some of the very dark colors around the outside. Once I had the whole heart shape and the darker colors, I wanted to add in then Mary and the baby. And it was a case of using that one half of the heart as Mary's bent head, her neck bending over, right? Then just added her face with a gold Sharpie and the baby Jesus in with a gold Sharpie. Don't worry about trying to add facial features. That's, you know, we all know by looking at this, mother and child, it's Christmas. Must be married. So we know, right? The brain knows. And then it was a difficult, initially I thought, well, how am I going to, do I wrap Mary around with the following of the heart? And I opted just to sort of have Mary envelop then the bottom of it. But having the lines with the paint, when I drew the outline here, all I didn't add any extra color here. I took this flat brush, this smaller flat brush, right, added water to it, and then just kept this sweeping motion, cleaned it off, rinsed it out, added a little more, made sure that it was just damp, not soaking, and then just kept doing this. And it reactivates the watercolor that's underneath of it, so it's going to pick up that color. You can still see what's happening underneath of it, but now you also know that there is this sense of Mary, you know, wrapping sort of around. And I love that about this. This was a lot of fun. This, I had no idea how it was going to turn out, and I think in the document that I sent out, by the looks of things, it looked kind of like a mess at some point. There was a lot of stuff going on the tape, and it was dark, and it was scary. I really wasn't sure. And at the top here, again, this was a case of, it was too dark for me. I wanted some other sense of light. This is the focal, this is where your eye goes, but I just wanted another sense of light. And again, taking that round brush, making sure that it's clean. I rolled it a few times and then took this flat brush again and swept up. All right, so I rinsed that out, clean it, get the excess water, and swept it up. Just kept swiping, you know, brushing up. And that's how I got that effect, that radiating effect with a little bit of light source there. All right, I'm really happy with that one. So again, if you're keeping that heart, now if you wanted to do a star shape in the center, again, if you chose stars to be your focal for your intentional Advent, as being that reminder to remain awake and aware, you could do a star and then just follow the star shape all the way out, and then decide what you want. Maybe you don't need anything, you may not want to do anything else, but just the star shape that radiates out, and it can radiate in whatever colors you want. It doesn't have to be in the blues and the purples. It can, but it doesn't have to. All right, so whatever you choose, but the radiating effect, where there's one focal point where your eye goes to, and then it moves out, it's a lot of fun to do, okay? And you could use, right, the bubble wrap, the saran wrap if you wanted, instead of just adding the water to these sections. It dripped. There are a couple of places here that you might be like, I don't know what this was supposed to be, Carolyn. Well, you know what? It was a drip. I got impatient at one point, in all honesty, with the hair dryer. This is what happens. It pooled a little too much, and the hair dryer was like, shh, and it blew, and I left it. You know, I don't know what it's just, you have to accept that it is. It just is at this point. That again, as I mentioned last week, was a cautionary tale with the with the hair dryer. It happens. And as a bonus, this was just fun. I was trying something, and you may want to do this after Christmas, or You know, you could do it as your, again, one of your love pieces. And, you know, I've got love here at the bottom. And this is very much back to that piece, the peace piece, the PEACE of the PIECE, where you did your colors and then added texture. So I started with sort of the ground coloring, the browny green sort of color, a little bit lighter sky going darker and darker, and then added the saran to it. The one thing that I did do, I did an outline. I'll actually show you on this piece, because this one's still taped up. I did the hut, the stable, very, very just simply, you know, 2 sides and a roof, with some light brown paint. Then I went around with the water, very close to it, but not touching it, right, unless this is perfectly dry, and added the saran. And in one case, I think I may have added the saran in sections as well, and gotten darker and darker. And now you could go ahead and you could put in, if you want, Mary and Joseph and the baby, if you want just the manger, or maybe nothing. Maybe you just want to paint this in bright yellow and then have a radiating effect, right? Much like these, again, you can add the water to something that's already there with that flat brush to bring that sweeping motion up. In this case, I used some white watercolor with that sweeping motion, added the yellow, did some splatter, added the star. The star I did in the white acrylic, and then I outlined the star with the silver metallic marker. Again, this is just a fun piece. If this appeals to you, though it's still much abstract, right? But it's perhaps not as abstract as this, or the big, you know, heart in the sky for Bethlehem, whichever. Like I say, I'm not. You have your options as to what pieces you do this week, because I want you to really feel the sense of freedom in how you go about it this week. You've spent 3 weeks with the watercolor, and allow yourself that you trust in yourself, that you have experienced enough now, that you can create anything that your I was just going to say anything that your heart desires. But there are some options, some ideas, some examples, and allow that creativity to flow through. All right, and now we'll leave this and we'll recenter with our breathing and our prayer. Before we go into our moment of recentering, I want to say a very heartfelt thank you to each and every one of you that has joined us these last 4 weeks. What a wonderful journey it's been, and possibly a little uncomfortable for some of you at times. It's not easy expanding into well, first of all, allowing yourself to create freely is not an easy thing to do. And so if you have allowed yourself to not use an eraser, or more amazingly enough, not to sketch anything out, and just go ahead and put down something in paint and put down something in marker and say, I'm just gonna go with it. I'm gonna go with that, however that creativity comes alive, then good for you. It's a really hard process, and I hope that you continue on with allowing yourself that freedom to create. And in that creating, that we, find ourselves a little more restored, and praying while we do it, as it is a prayer practice, that you allow the voice of God to be heard throughout all of the chaos and the clutter that can be found in today's world so very easily. So let us go ahead now and we shall recenter. So breathing, let's do some breathing. Feet flat on the floor, backs up straight, and a good deep breath in, as we had said in that earlier prayer that when we said, Creator God, create in us the new intentions to show our love to all of creation and that desire to live simply, right? And to appreciate every bite of food and every drop of clean water and every breath of air. So let's take in that deep breath, and on the way in say to ourselves, may we see the love of God, and on the way out, the love of God in all creation. And on the way in, may we see the love of God. And on the way out, the love of God in all people. And on the way in, may we see the love of God. And on the way out, the love of God in all the moments of our days. May we love and live life on purpose. So together we say, Creator God, quiet my mind before it passes judgment on this prayer, my gift of time to you. Amen. Remember to play your music. Remember to relax. Do those deep breathings. Remember to stay aware, stay attentive to the feel of the paper, to those brush strokes, to the paint moving, to the water mixing, to the colors, how the colors mix, the textures when you're adding down the gauze for baby Jesus, all of these things to help live more intently throughout the rest of Advent. And Merry Christmas to each and every one of you. Thank you so much again for being here. God bless.